So I've been thinking about faith, and I want to talk about what biblical authentic faith actually is. What is the essence of biblical faith? So I think it's helpful to kind of tease out, where do we go off the path with this? Where do we venture off the path of what Scripture wants to communicate about faith? Because faith is the key to spiritual rest. So we got to get this right. So we'll kind of talk about, I think, two key ways that you can see in our culture that you veer off the path of faith. So if you've seen the movie, the Christian film, God Is Not Dead, it's really interesting how the movie develops the concept of faith. Basically, the plot of the movie is there's a kid in college. Him and his professor are kind of going head to head in class. You know, it's your classic atheist college professor trying to proselytize and convert the evangelical kid to abandoning his faith and embracing agnosticism or atheism. And so that's the plot of the movie. And so the good part of the movie is that the kid stands firm for Christian apologetics and defending God. But it's really interesting, like looking at the way the screenwriters understand faith. You can kind of see what their concept of faith is, and I think it's very telling as to what most people in evangelicalism today consider faith. So long story short, there's no talk about really Christ at all. Faith is a little bit more arbitrary and refers to more of believing in God, because the problem with the professor, the plot is that the professor rejects the existence of God. So the whole narrative unfolds, and by the end of the film, the professor basically admits that he's wrong. He gets hit by a car and he's laying in the road, and the pastor in the film is there at the perfect time to wish him farewell from this life to the next. And there's no mention of really any substantial gospel concepts. Really, faith is communicated as believing in God. So the kid, he believes in God, the professor doesn't. So it's almost this oversimplified version of faith that plays out through this whole film. There's no communication about Christ and the gospel, no real articulation of what are we actually trusting in, what is the essence of our faith, and what does our faith look to? Does our faith just look to God exists and God is real, God is not dead? If so, then the movie did a great job. So I think that kind of helps to develop the first idea of faith that I think is very faulty in a lot of ways. It's this concept of faith is believing in the existence of God, and once you concede God exists, you are on the path to saving faith. The problem with this is, think about how many world religions exist where people concede God's existence and yet have no conception of Christ. Would we say that those people are genuinely regenerate? I don't think so. So then why would we build narratives and ideas for people that that's the essence of faith? So I would call that an underemphasized faith. There are elements of true saving faith existent, I guess you could say, within that, but it kind of misses the mark. If you don't have Christ, you don't really have anything to trust in. The fact that God exists is really a curse for you because it means you're going to be judged unless you have Christ as your covering. So that's, I think, the first way that we veer off the path in defining faith. Faith has to be more than God exists. And great, if we're showing people God exists, and they're becoming theists, I think there can be a win there. I think there's an apologetic win in that regard. Maybe that's the first step to people finding Christ. I'm not going to debate that. But I think we have to be careful distinguishing true faith versus belief in God, because the Bible doesn't define faith as belief in the existence of God. In fact, in Romans 1, Paul is very clear that man intrinsically knows God exists. We all know God exists through creation, through morality. There's a lot of ways that God reveals himself, not in a saving way, as we're talking about, but in the sense that we all know God exists. We suppress it because we want to be God. We want to be our own gods. And so it's very natural for us to suppress the idea of a supreme being that has some kind of authority over us. So Scripture is clear, first off, that just believing in God is not necessarily positive from a saving aspect, although it may be a step in the right direction. The saving faith in Scripture has always been very clear, and I want to get into that, but let's talk about the other side of the road, kind of veering off the other way on faith, and then we'll talk about what true faith is.